Welcome back, Blab. Before we get started, I just remind everybody that this episode is dedicated to our patrons over on Patreon because they support us and they help us out, and that's awesome. And thank you guys for doing so. All right, so in our last episode, and I don't want to do this right now because the last episode was challenging, and this was challenging too. But in our last episode, we left off with Sparrowhawk resting in an unnamed village of the West Hand, having just this mystical experience. I don't know what happened exactly, bonded to the shadow somehow, and...
Right, there's more talk of that in this chapter, so I think we'll get into that for sure.
Exactly, but that's where we left him, resting in that little village. So that's exactly where we pick him up again.
Can I say maybe some pre-thoughts that we'll delve into, but I just wanted to put some thoughts into your head or see if you're on the same page with me on this chapter, just before we totally dive into it. I feel like this chapter had kind of a lot of fill-in stuff about lore and things of that nature. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, sure. But let me guess on one of the subjects.
Sure.
The conversation about how magic works towards the end. Is that one of the ones?
Yes, that one's for sure.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. Shall we? Okay. Oh, right. Almost forgot. We today are talking about chapter 9.
Iffish.
Right. It's a funny word, but it turns out it's a place. If you look at the map like Blab does, you would know that. I had to have that pointed out to me because I stopped looking at the map a while back because it stopped being important. Yeah, but you would have
soon learned it into the chapter. It's not like it's unexplained or anything.
But we pick up in this chapter right where we left off with Sparrowhawk in that nameless village on the west hand, north of the East Reach. And he's picking up a new boat, and he's making sure that it's paid for, and he's making sure that he's doing like all these really, really generous acts of goodness in this village.
Yes.
While he's waiting for the boat to be finished and paid for and etc.
Okay, so he's getting this boat together, and like you said, he's doing a lot of things. He heals a man's cataracts.
Yep.
And makes him see again.
That was the payment for the boat. It was a good boat. It was a really good boat.
It was a good payment.
Yes.
Which was then repaid again by the old dude. I say repaid. Like, the boat's called the Sanderling, but he wants Ged to call it the Lookfar and to paint eyes on it so that he can watch over him on the sea. I just thought that was very interesting. And then I was like, magic or it's like kindness and karma? Like, he was very sincere, the old man. Like,
almost like a prayer, right?
There's no mention anything after that, like, and Ged thought that was like great comfort or anything like that. It's just something that happens. The efficacy was never
tested, maybe.
Right. But it's just a statement that the old man makes, and then we move on. But
part of the statement that he says is that you have brought light into the darkness.
Yes.
Like, I think that's kind of the meaning through we see that 3 times, I think, in this chapter. People talking about bringing light into darkness.
He forgot how much light there is in the world till Ged gave it back.
Yeah, so he was super, super grateful, and he said that part about, I'll look over your boat, my spirit will look over your boat, or whatever that he said.
I think we're getting a lot of like reminders, kind of like at us about maybe what this whole story is about.
Well, I wonder about that also. Yes,
I'm not willing to say what it's all about at this point.
Well, you probably shouldn't because
I'm just on the ride till the end. So, yes. But I feel like that's what's happening in this chapter.
How would you describe his like activities around this town? Like, can you kind of put it into a word or two? Like, how do you feel? Like, what's the quality of the work that he's doing there, and why is he doing it? And what's the effect?
A couple runes are mentioned that seem very important, or long lasting, or very strong.
I think there's some pretty serious implications when he's talking about placing runes on the tree roof of a building.
The sim on the spindles and looms and boat oars and tools. So I think that's like something to make their good quality work.
Efficiency.
Maybe even making them feel better as they work. Who knows? We don't get any explanation on that, but again, important. No. And then the other one was the rune Pirr, Pirr. Like you said, roof trees of the huts, and it protected it from fire, wind, and madness. Madness.
Yeah. So to me, he's just kind of running around that village doing like nothing but good.
Like, why would he be doing ill?
He doesn't have to do anything. right?
Well, I guess that's
he could have
true.
just paid for his boat, but he didn't. He chose to like go and help these people out like in every possible way he could, and he even taught them songs.
Yes, I was going to go back and check, but I didn't want to look through the whole book. I wish I had this on a tablet or something where I could just look up words.
We'll get it on a tablet.
But I don't. The Deed of Mored. I feel like we had heard that before, like when he was on the sea or something like that.
I have not been keeping track of that stuff.
I may be misremembering. It kind of doesn't matter, but I thought we had heard of the Deed of Mored before, and then the other one was the Havnorian Lay.
He's doing all of this nice protective magic, warding magic, beneficial magic. He's buying his boat from an old gentleman, but I don't know. He just does a lot of really good stuff. And then, he wants to stay longer, but he has duty to do. So he moves on, 3 days and he's gone back at sea.
And as we talked about in the last chapter, he just knows where to find this thing and where he's headed. But it is said again, like he didn't have to cast a finding charm. He knows where he's going to get this thing.
They have an inextricable link at this point, and that happened at the very end of the last chapter.
Yeah, the whole grabbing out. And
that real strange
touching,
moment.
not touching thing.
Yeah, where the sea meets
which gets
the land
talked about again later, too. And it's the same explanation.
It's a metaphysical experience that he had, and I'm not sure what it means. All right, so he sails, and after 1 day of sailing, he ends up at this tiny little village called Vemish, and he's met kind of like right after he gets off the boat by a little wizard who's kind of uppity and says, you got to kind of turn around, buddy. You've been seen here lately, and you weren't casting a shadow, so, just maybe you should leave.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 days earlier or something he said. It's like something, earlier. He's like, listen, we'll give you some stuff, but get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
Because these people are freaked out and you look like this really
I think the wizard was a little freaked out as well.
I'm sure he was too. But Ged left. He turned around and just left.
Sparrowhawk does not want to antagonize the villagers or the wizard, so he's back on the sea and he sleeps out there that night.
He's on a very personal mission. And this whole time, he's never wanted to hurt anybody else with this thing. That's been very forefront, don't you think, in his mind during this whole thing?
That was largely the reason why he left Lotorning.
So it wasn't surprising that there was no conflict there.
No, not at all.
When he went back to sea, he said he'd rather sleep on the sea. So he went back to sea and sleep. And he thought over the news that the sorcerer had told him, like, about the shadow looking like him, and it said he was sorely puzzled by it. And I was like, was he? Like, he's puzzled by it.
It is a newish thing.
I guess it is a new form for this thing to take. His form.
It's definitely, that part's new. That's new.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
It had looked like a man before when it had taken over Skior.
Right.
And it, had pursued him.
Well, that was the Gebish, the taking over an actual man's body. But now it just seems like he's taken the form of Ged.
It looks enough like him that people are mistaking him for it.
So he's like a soul. This thing's like a soul vampire or something.
I don't know.
He doesn't cast a shadow.
Right. I don't know the rules. I don't know the rules.
Yeah, nor do I.
All right, so 24 hours later, after leaving Vemish, he comes across this town, Ismay, which seems like a much more prosperous place, but still a village, essentially. He follows the fishing boats in, and there's this inn there called the Hierarchy.
Yes, the Hierarchy. And I'm just looking at it, and I'm going, that's what that is.
Yeah. We'll get there in just a minute. It won't take long.
Right.
So he stays at this place, and he's having dinner, and it's kind of like the locals show up and drink beer and have conversations, but everybody knows he's kind of got a black cloud over him. And the barkeep, he tells him off in a really nice and considerate way by saying essentially that they've already got a wizard, and he's really awesome. And
if anybody knows anybody who's extremely passive aggressive, it's like that sort of a thing. It's like you're saying something in the nicest way to where if you explain the situation, someone would be like, well, what happened? It's like, no, this.
He was prying for information. At the same time, he was telling him that his wares were not needed. They already had a wizard. He graduated from Roke and everything.
As they say, two staffs in one town must come to blows.
That's
Isn't it so, sir?
Of course they would. This is my turf. Wizard fight. I mean,
but is it? We haven't come across any of that. Well, except at wizarding school, which of course, but that's a whole different thing.
Who knows?
But we haven't come across any of that yet. Anyway,
I think it's a nice detail. It's really, really funny, and it made me kind of giggle.
It's at least what the normies would think of wizards.
Sure. Well, you remember the sorceress in Ogian They were at loggerheads. They might have been too close. They might have had
true.
overlapping territory.
We'll never. Well, I say we'll never know, but I feel like
know.
we'll never know. It's only in our imaginations what their beef
Oh,
was.
I think that lady's daughter is dead. That's too sad. What? That is sad.
That's fine. I'm just like, okay, yeah.
All right. So he stays the night in that inn. I don't know how to say that. I'm just going to go with hierarchy, right? Okay, moving on. He stays the night there in that inn, and then in the morning, he's kind of like reluctant to get back on the road again, or the ocean again, the sea. He's delaying for some reason, and it's not really clear that he's aware of why, but he's having kind of a reflection moment that day. Like, he's looking at these townies, and he's remembering what it's like to be part of a community, and he knows that he's on the outside, that he's not part of it. And I think he's like a little bit jealous, forlorn, feeling a sense of loss, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's almost evening again by the time he's like not wanting to go back to the inn, but he doesn't want to go out to sea. And that's when he hears a familiar voice.
A man and a little girl, but he recognized the man's voice.
So it's Vetch. This is Vetch's town. So we had just gotten the indication from Sparrowhawk that like this is the area where Vetch is from, you know, and he's being all like feeling lost and like wanting to be a part of something. And then sure enough, he hears that voice, and it's Vetch, and he goes to catch up to him. He walks up to the side of him, and the girl steps back, and the wizard kind of like puts up his staff, like warding him off. And he's got that little quaver in his voice, and he's like, "I thought you would know me, Vetch." It's like, oh, he's a little heartbroken right there. I mean, that's a rough moment for him, I think.
But then Vetch hesitated and then was like, "I do know you."
Well, he had a real good reason not to open up with hugs. Right.
Yes, as we've already heard, and then gets again confirmed by Vetch later. Somebody who looks like him,
and doesn't cast a shadow.
Doesn't cast a shadow. Who has?
Well, it looks just like him.
It looks just like him.
It looks just like him, and it was in the hill. It was in the town that's set in the hills just above where they are right now. 3 days ago.
Yeah, and that's where Vetch was, right?
Yeah, he'd run it. He'd tried to catch up to it and couldn't. He's like, "I'd swear that's Sparrowhawk, my good buddy," but no. So he had a reason to be hesitant. But now it's whatever. He's like, "Come back to my house. Why are we talking in the streets? Let's go home."
They spoke each other's like true names, kind of like whispered, so like the girl couldn't hear.
This is where the clue kicked in, and I was like, I need to look up his name. So I did.
Who, Vetch?
Yeah, Vetch's true name. Yeah.
I just kept going with it because I was like, wait, Vetch isn't his true name, but it does come up later again. But yeah.
Say it out loud. Say his...
Was it Astariel?
Okay, that's good for memory. Leave it there. All right, we'll come back to it at the end. So there's only one brief interaction between the young girl and Sparrowhawk before they get to the house, and that is her and the dragon that's wrapped around her wrist that she's wearing like a bracelet.
Yeah, at first I kind of did a double take or a double read on that because it's like on her sleeve there clung, winged and taloned, a dragon no longer than her hand. At first I was just kind of reading, like I thought it was like a description of her outfit or something.
Yeah, just
and
something
then I was
sewn
like,
on.
wait, that's a dragon. I was
it's
like,
a little
is that
animal.
familiar?
It's
That's
a little
what I thought
animal,
at first.
and it's called a hierarchy.
Yeah, like
So
the
it's
inn.
the same as the inn, yeah.
But she says, I don't know if it's here, but at least later on, she just explains like these things are all over the place around here, and they don't
they're
get any
common.
bigger than this little guy that she
Right,
has, which is
right.
never named. They just refer to it as the hierarchy.
No, did you notice also that when Vetch invited him home, he said, "Time to get out of the dark"?
Oh my gosh, no, I missed that.
Okay, so they get back to the house. They head basically to shelter, and he's going to stay with them for a while. The house is described as like super nice. It's really well equipped because the family was pretty wealthy, so they had like really nice stuff.
I made note of this. Did we know this about Vetch at the school? Because I feel like we weren't told any information like that.
I don't think so.
Like, I didn't get that impression in
No.
our previous chapters with Vetch, and it was just very interesting. Like, he comes from means just like Jasper came from means. But no, I wrote this before it came up. I wrote this down before it came up. But, like, Jasper versus Vetch. Like, Jasper was from means as well, correct? Or at least we're told, right?
Well, he acted like it anyway.
So correct. We have no idea, but that's what we assumed at the time. We did not assume that of Vetch, but look here, like Vetch comes like the way it's described. He's got like, there's like Ivor, like there's just, he's a lord basically in this town.
He has a lot of nice stuff. His dad was a trader or a merchant, and yeah, he's definitely, high middle class or whatever it is. I don't know anything about Jasper or Havnor or what family he came from at all. But it does seem like Jasper was a little bit more of a prick, and Vetch was a little bit awesome. Right. Didn't let it go to his head, maybe.
I liked this part when Ged was like looking around after this description of Ged's manor, or this house or whatever.
Vetch's house.
And he's like, this is how a man should live inside. And right before I read the next line, I was just like, man, Ged is just like in this depressive, horrible state. And I'm like, no. And then Vetch immediately says, well, it's one good way. Because, like, obviously, it's like you're being so, like, come on. No.
Melodramatic.
Like, exactly.
He is younger, and he doesn't have all of these nice things that Vetch has. Vetch does have it a lot better than him. He's living at home with his family. He's the lord of his house. Like, he's secure in his position. He seems pretty happy. And old Sparrowhawk is miserable, living as a transient on the sea, like on this doomed quest. These guys are opposites.
Due to his own actions.
Well, yeah, but it's, all the stuff that Vetch has.
I mean, obviously Vetch's wealth is due from his family and birth, but he's obviously keeping it up fine. Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
He went and got the education, and now he and Sparrowhawk are kind of opposites, right?
I guess so, yeah.
They're kind of opposites.
He has this kind of, like, we don't know about Vetch's life, really, but this kind of cush. He's not even the wizard of this town, Iffish. He just lives here because that's where he's from.
He's a wizard for the whole region.
Or am I mixing up the towns?
No, he's wizard for the whole region. He just chooses to live here. They have a long conversation that night.
So Vetch wants to go with him. Ged doesn't want him to go. It's like, it's his task. You, least of all, who tried to keep my hand from the evil act in the very beginning, Astariel. And then he cuts him off. Vetch cuts him off and says, pride was ever your mind's master.
We called that.
His friend said, smiling, as if they talked of a matter of small concern to either.
Well, we knew he was a prideful little thing.
Like, Vetch just calls it out. Like it's such an obvious thing that we've,
But it's also in the past.
Again, this chapter is pointing out things that kind of should be or are or were obvious that maybe we should be remembering again or thinking about.
Little reminder.
Yeah.
Little reminder.
And also, like, Vetch sees clearly his friend.
Farsight.
Just insight into him or whatever. I liked his first argument was like, listen, if the quest fails, there should be somebody to like warn the archipelago, but also conversely, if you succeed, someone's got to like tell of the deed of this tale.
Yep.
And like Ged had no argument against it. He's like, well, yeah. And then here's some more self-pity from Ged. I should not have stayed this day here. I knew it, but I stayed.
Yes, but I mean, Vetch is right that wizards don't meet by chance. It means something. These meetings mean something.
Yeah, and don't moan about what could have been or what you didn't do. You did it. You're here. We met. Now what?
And I think it's a settled thing. Vetch is going to go with, and there's not much that old Sparrowhawk can do about it.
Do you think he wants to argue against any of these arguments?
No. I think he's very happy to have Vetch coming along. I think he really is pleased that this is happening. Like, I think this is a good thing.
Oh my God, I just had a horrible thought, actually. Especially based off of what the sister says at the end of this chapter. Does Vetch survive this journey? I mean, we know this is the tale of Sparrowhawk, a great wizard.
Yeah, I'm going to go with he survives.
Oh my God, I have doom and gloom feelings about what's going to be happening to Vetch later. I haven't looked at anything, I just thought of this now.
I think you're being pessimistic here.
I am.
I hope not. I hope that everything's fine. But they finished the evening with a lot of conversation.
Here's a question that Vetch put forth in their conversation that I was like, yeah, that's a good question. He didn't understand some things. There's some things that are worrying Vetch as far as this whole shadow thing is concerned. How come it goes by your shape now, or at least the likeness of you, How may that be, and why did it never do so in the archipelago?
The very last line on that page is like what Ged thinks. He says, "The turning of my will upon it gave it shape and form."
Right.
But like as far as how it happened and why it happened, they don't have any answers for that. They just know that it's going in his shape now. And like I like to think that maybe they're getting close to kind of like a finale or a peak or a climax or something. And so the closer they get to that moment, the more it's going to resemble him. And they're so close at this point, only one chapter away, that it probably looks so closely like him that it can be mistaken for him by someone who knows him well. That's my thinking.
This whole section is just, it's like two friends talking it out, figuring out the problems.
Right.
Like we're doing right now.
So Jasper never graduated. He might have his GED. He might have gone to like, the after school special or whatever, but he never got his staff from Roke.
He's being paid by that rich couple, I assume.
The Lord and Lady of O, who he's so impressed with that amazing illusion of his with the Tree of Life.
I wonder what he does there for her.
I have strange feelings about sexy time, but I'm not going to go there because I don't think it matters.
We know
not
nothing.
In this book. Yeah,
and Vetch knows nothing except all he says he never won his staff. That's all he knows.
And he went over there to work. I think at the end of dinner, Sparrowhawk is kind of like reiterates this notion that like he's convinced firmly that he needs to learn this thing's name. And that's the path he's kind of after. That's the way he thinks that he's going to have to approach this subject. And they have this little conversation about Genscher being the only person that said the thing didn't have a name. And then a dragon, a sorceress, and Ogian have all said it's got to have a name.
Infinite are the arguments of mages, Vetch quoted.
So they end up staying up all night talking. And in the morning, Sparrowhawk wakes up under the roof of his friend's house, and I think that it's a pretty good time for him. He's comfortable, he's warm, he's rested, he's with friends. I think he feels pretty safe. He's on a mission. He has a partner, and that makes me happy for him. But Vetch has a lot of chores to do, essentially, before he can go off on this little mission. So he disappears to go and do those things. And so we have this long scene with Sparrowhawk and Yarrow and, what's his name?
Myrrh.
So the ages, because Vetch has referred to Sparrowhawk twice as a lad. And I was like, huh? Is he that much older?
Well, let's think about it here. So
it's very clear. It's very clear. Sparrowhawk and Myrrh are the same age. They're 19. Yarrow is about 14. It's never actually explicitly stated that she's 14, but she's about 14.
But Myrrh and Ged are the same age, right?
They're the same age. He's the middle child, and he's older than Yarrow by the same age that Vetch is older than him. So Vetch is 24-ish.
Right, because Myrrh is 19, which means Ged is 19.
Oh, she's 14? Yeah, 5 years. 24.
Did it say 5? I don't remember.
No, they never said how old she was.
Okay.
He said that he thought she was about 14. What did you think of the demureness? No, I don't think that's the right word, actually. What did you think about the way that she gestured and hid her eyes and bobbed her head? And, like, what did you think about that? Like, did you picture that?
I underlined actually all of those moments just because...
the ways that women from that area greet people.
It stood out a little bit, not in a bad way or anything, but also kind of just as a world building thing, as in this is a big world, just like our world.
A lot of different customs.
Lots of different customs, lots of different things are going on, lots of different people. In this part of the world, there's this traditional thing. And as Ged was walking through the village also, I thought about this as well. Always those traditional roles of like the women were at their looms and the men were at their boats or whatever. It's always described in that fashion. It's like there are no women fishermen. They're at the looms.
Yeah, women's work.
Doing womanly duties. But it's like a man can loom and a woman can fisher, but...
It's a little more traditional than that right now. Like, for example, Yarrow makes them dinner. She serves them dinner that first night, and she's making the provisions.
And then sits down and eats with them and asks questions and isn't talked down to in any way or anything. It's not like there's...
it's not about that.
But there is a certain...
There's division of labor.
Yes.
That's all. It does not imply less than or greater than. It just is.
Especially in this description.
I thought it was a very nice gesture. Like, I thought it was really, really kind of cool to picture in my head. Like, I'm not exactly sure what it means to cover her eyes, but she shaded her eyes during this greeting. And so I kind of picture it like this and then the head bob, right?
Right.
I don't know. It's just really, really nice. It's a very visual moment that I could see in my head, and I appreciate that always.
Well, and also I think immediately in my mind too, it's like this is a respectful person or like somebody that
manners, all that good stuff.
Manners, and then has some sort of maturity. So she's getting all the food ready for their journey, their provisions.
Right.
And that's when the question comes up. She's like, I've always been wondering, like, why can't you just like say meat pie and have the meat pie appear and just eat and be fine?
Mm-hmm. So she also used the same terminology. She has seen her brother and his apprentice bring light into the darkness. So why can't you just create food?
But so he just describes it's only a word. It has no strength to a hungry man. She's like, okay, but I've seen you make, or wizards, I've seen my brother and his apprentice make light out of nowhere, and you can see the light and it lights up things. So what's up with that?
What do you think is up with that?
Well, he explains that light is a power.
And it's also time.
Right.
And time is also light.
And sunlight
like they're interchangeable.
And starlight are time, which kind of makes sense to me. Like if you're into like the whole like physics and the speed of light and all of that stuff.
It does sound like modern physics. I mean, this was a really silly, kind of confusing part, and it's like a 19-year-old trying to explain PhD level physics to a young person and not really doing a good job. And then he kind of has a little breakdown there because he realizes that he's been wrong about so much in the past that he's not really sure anymore. He doesn't know the answers that he's trying to pass off as certainty, assurances, knowledge. And I think that's why he kind of cracks at the end there and storms off into the night.
Mm-hmm. And then the little dragon steals a cake.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I wonder how the Otok and the hierarchy would have gotten along. That's what I thought.
Well, the Otok was mentioned.
It was.
Earlier in the chapter.
Well, she had heard about this Otok from Vetch and was very interested.
Yeah. Vetch was real smart in that moment. He did not want to have that conversation.
He did not press.
He definitely didn't press. But I think it was kind of a mercy, because it's
sure.
going to be a rough topic. They did talk about it, but he saved it for nighttime when, his sister wasn't around.
Yeah. So the hierarchy takes a cake, and then... so then you don't summon up a real pie lest you disturb what my brother is always talking about. And then she's like, I forget the name, and then gets says equilibrium.
Which didn't sound right to me.
Which
I was expecting
hadn't
pattern.
been brought up before.
Yeah. No,
We've heard balance.
Pattern or balance, yeah.
But we haven't seen equilibrium.
Equilibrium is kind of the same word as balance.
It is. We just hadn't seen it or heard it before. And
Yeah.
Ged said this.
Like, it doesn't strike me as particularly true, right? Like, some of the stuff that's going on here, we've just been reminded that, like, there's magic that Ged knows nothing about. Sparrowhawk knows nothing about. Mm-hmm. The sorcerers on Roke, they don't know everything.
Maybe it's just described differently in this area. Like, balance is equilibrium. Equilibrium is balance. It's just described as equilibrium around here.
Why would it come from him, then? It would have come from her, not him, right? If that's how it's talked about out here.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was kind of interesting.
So one of Sparrowhawk's explanations to Yarrow is that there's only really one word, and we're talking about, true names kind of words. There's only one word, and everybody's name, the ocean's name, all of these names are they're all syllables of this one word being slowly spoken in the universe. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the trigger for him to go poopy head and like not be super happy anymore, because maybe that's baffling to him as well. But it reminded me of chapter 3 when he met Nemeril, and he had this kind of like moment of clarity, and like he could understand the water falling, mm-hmm. and he could understand the birds chirping, and like it all was kind of unified. And like that's what my mind went thrown way back to that chapter.
Mm-hmm. They keep pressing him on this idea of like illusions versus like let's simplify it as like real magic versus fake magic. Like, I don't even know how you'd want to describe it, but like he's like, well, what about the boat?
Well, it's trying to inform us. I mean, honest to God, like I really thought that this last part was kind of rough. I felt like it didn't, you said last chapter that there was a moment where you felt like it was kind of inserted, a little bit heavy-handed.
Sure.
I felt that way about this conversation.
It feels, like I said earlier, it feels like this chapter is, trying to fill in some gaps or fill in.
Mm-hmm. This is the only part I had a problem with.
Or at least like pound into us like this is kind of what you should have already been feeling about this world, and here we're going to kind of spell it out, I guess, a little bit.
Reminders and etc. Yeah.
He's not describing it well, and maybe we aren't either. But then Yarrow's like, tell me this, if it is not a secret, what other great powers are there besides light? And I was like, good question.
I thought it was odd that light was considered the only power. Like, that's garbage. That has to be garbage.
But he had described it earlier as one of the great powers. So her question was totally reasonable. And then when he got into his answer, it was like Yule was answering a question. It went on this like long tangent where it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Did you get that feeling, or do you remember
I
that?
got the feeling that it was a lecture, and it was like, I kind of blame it on her, not on Sparrowhawk.
Fine.
I blame it on Guin, not on Sparrowhawk.
Well, that's fine. But like the answer to the question of what are other great powers besides light, he was like, it is no secret. All power is one source in the end, I think. Years and distances, stars and candles, water and wind and wizardry, the craft in a man's hand, and the wisdom in a tree's root, they all arise together.
Okay, so growing things are like some of magic.
And then there's there's more that's listed as well. There's more that's listed as well. True names, babies, all are syllables, like you said, of the great word that is very slowly spoken by the shining stars. There is no other power, no other name.
I think he realizes he's wrong, though, or doesn't know. I mean, I can't imagine that that's all it is, and that they've figured it all out. You know what I mean? I think he doesn't know, and he realizes that he doesn't know. I think that's what's going on.
After this, he runs away. Not runs away from everybody, but he I don't know.
Walks out into the night, and it's a poopy night too. I think it's like wet.
Yeah, it's raining, and Myrrh says he is under a curse. And then she says, Yarrow, I think this voyage he is on leads him to his death, and he fears that, yet he goes on.
Yeah.
And then she gets all teary-eyed.
Together.
Well, and then she sees them off like the women do.
In the morning.
That whole last line is very poetic, describing Yarrow standing there and waving them off.
Not waving.
Oh, correct. Excuse me. Thank you.
It's so much easier. My family has this really kind of obnoxious habit of waving until you're out of sight. You know what I mean?
And it's just like you don't know what to do, or just like you feel stupid too. It's like, what are we doing?
Why am I still waving at you? I'm done waving. Goodbye. Short streets. You want to live on a short street in my family. Okay, so let's talk about Ged, Sparrowhawk.
Mm-hmm.
So he did that really, really generous act of like pure good in the beginning, like with that village when he was getting the boat and telling them all the stories and like catching them up on the world and all that protective and warding magic and etc.
He was setting them up basically. He was like, making sure they're all
as best he
set
could.
Up.
As best he could in the time allotted. It's just a really good act, right? Like I don't know another way to describe that. It was just a good act. So another good thing that he did is he left the village when the wizard came down out of the hills and was like, no, you can't really be here, right? You're freaking the people out. And he's like, okay. And he goes and he sleeps on the boat, which is a hardship, and he didn't have to do it, right? But he did it anyway. So he's being good. So it's like this reminder kind of, for me at least, like in the past, he's been such a little prick. And now he's like doing these good things followed by good things. You remember you were talking about great wizards? You were talking about great wizards a couple of chapters ago? Mm-hmm. Well, this I think is the definition of a great wizard. A wizard that goes around and does good for no recompense necessarily. And like Vetch's moment, I think, was when he spared Sparrowhawk having to tell the tale of the Otok, and he spared his younger sister from having to listen to this horrible tale. I think that was an indication of greatness right there. Like I think that's what it is.
I think also accompanying Ged is also a sign of greatness too.
What a generous act. But we already knew he was really generous. Like he gave him his name, It's like straight away. He's like, come to my house, hang out with me. I'm Astariel.
We kind of skimmed over this a little bit, but when Vetch was going off, he had to leave for a few days before they left, at the end. He had his errands. His errands were going around to the different towns and villages around and talking to the lords or the people in charge and just basically telling them like,
The people with big pants.
I'm going, and they're obviously not happy about it, but he's like, listen, I am a servant, I'm not your servant. Peace. I'll be back, hopefully.
He did a mic drop too.
That was like a few sentences, but I thought that was funny.
It was really good. I really like Vetch. I like him particularly much. His name, Astariel. So the biggest bell on the bandolier.
Oh, gosh, yes, Astariel. How is it spelled?
It's spelled differently, but it's the same pronunciation, essentially. His name is more like the Oriole, you know? It's got the I and the O and the L. And in Nix's book, it's A-E-L. And it begins with an A instead of an E. But, I mean, it's so close. It's so close. The pronunciation is essentially the same.
Interesting. Why didn't I think of that? I thought so, too.
And it's the biggest bell. He's a big fella. And I don't know, man. That to me was the icing on the cake. When I looked that up, I was just like, oh, it's got to be a tip of the knot. You know, knot of the tip of the hat. Whatever, you know, one of those things. It's got to be.
The folklore of Yarrow, the genus name Achillea is derived from Achilles, like Achilles' heel.
Achilles.
The Greek.
Who did I don't know my Greek mythology.
Oh, well, you take down, it was like the secret spot to take down the Titan, or to take down Achilles.
Oh, his heel. No, Achilles' heel was his weak spot. Heel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he has more importance than that. Whatever. I don't know my Greek mythology. I can't speak to it. I feel like this was another pass-through chapter, though. Like a chapter where we learn lore, we travel a tiny little bit, we get caught up with some characters, and etc., and we are like repositioning and redirecting our attentions for the final chapter. And so it was kind of short. It read really quickly. I did feel that conversation towards the end with the siblings was a little bit not as well crafted as some of the rest of the book. Felt a little bit more like an afterthought. It could have
been more well crafted.
It was the first place in this book where I have been a little bit, not as pleased as I could have been. But I'm willing to overlook quite a lot, considering that's like 200 pages in, and the book is about to be over. We have one chapter left. That's it, just one.
I know.
And then it's done.
Curious.
Well, no, it's not done because there's 2 other books, and then I think she wrote a couple more. so it's not done, but it's done for us in one more chapter. Well, Blab.
Yes, Gab.
We have one chapter left. We've got Vetch on a boat with Sparrowhawk, and they're going after the thing.
The shadow, not shadow. Ged, not Ged.
All right, but I have nothing else to say, and I feel like that we shouldn't have a lot to say about this chapter because I think it was pretty straightforward, and it's leading us into the final chapter. So let's get back to reading, you and I, Blab, and catch back up in the next one.
More things will become clear when it's over, I'm sure.
I'm looking forward to the ending. We'll see you in the next chapter. Take care, everyone.
Bye.